but just truly, I want to know where people are at. What are you thinking about God? I don't know. I was like, okay, and so I began to talk to him, but basically we got to the point where I realized it wasn't I don't know, it's I don't want to know. He confessed boldly, bravely, that I don't really want to think about that. I don't want to think about it. And I actually think that's a tremendously acceptable answer. I don't think it's the right answer. It's going to eventually catch up with him, but it's logical. So many people don't realize that to think about God is to make a decision about God. He knew, I'm not ready to respond to God. I don't want to respond to God. And so if I think about Him, now I'm forced to. If I think about the fact that I've got to make a decision here in this park, is God real or not, and it's going to affect my life, I don't really want to make that decision and path of my life right now. And He didn't. But He showed me something that I think is absolutely critical to understanding who God is and how God works. And that is, theophany leads to response. And what I mean by theophany, God showing up. In the Old Testament, He shows up in a flame at different times, and we're going to look at one of those times. But even today, God's revelation of Himself through Jesus Christ, but also in history, but also through the gospel of Jesus Christ. The story, God speaking to our hearts and saying, do you believe who I am? Showing us, this is who I am. People still all over the world have encounters, have dreams, have visions, and many, many, many more have people share with them the gospel of Jesus Christ. And when that revelation happens, when that theophany happens, they are left to respond. God demands response at that point. Now, how you respond is up to you, but we see this in a story. So if you have your Bibles, you can look in Exodus 3. Theophanies can happen when you're searching for them. The man who is searching for the pearl of great price and finds it. And they can also just happen when God is ready. The man who stumbles on the treasure in the field, but once he finds that treasure, he's got to do something about it. Well, that's the way it is with Moses. Moses, I think, had plans to be a deliverer 40 years before this, and he delivered the Israelite from the Egyptian, and he killed the Egyptian, and then the next day somebody says, oh, are you going to treat me the way you treated that Egyptian? And he realized, oh no, I've been found out, and he's not such a strong deliverer anymore, and he flees. And this is the last we hear of Moses until this. I mean, it's the very chapter before it, but 40 years elapse. And he goes to Midian, and he's with his father-in-law. We find out he flees to Midian, meets a woman there, and then nothing happens for 40 years in Moses' life. We get one little key, though, from God saying, but God saw what was happening. He heard the cry of His people, and He saw what was going on. Now Moses. 40 years later, but we know God has not been away from the story. Moses has been gone, but God hasn't. Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. And he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. Moses on a normal flock feeding tour, going to find some grass, sees this, and it says that Moses said to himself, I will turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. Voice, whoever you are, here I am. And then he said, he being God, then God said, do not come near. Take your sandals off your feet, from the place on which you are standing is holy ground. Whatever that means. And he said, and I refer to that because I think that's what Moses obeys, but he still doesn't quite get it. But then God adds this, and he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid. He obeyed, he took his shoes off, but he still didn't know who is speaking to him. But when God revealed himself, now we have theophany. Now we understand, okay, this is God, the Father of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who has come down and is now speaking to me. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt and heard the cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land to a good broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now, behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? It's the first time Moses speaks to God when he knows it's God, other than here I am when he doesn't. And he says, how can I do this, God? And it's, RJ alluded to this. I'm helpless. I can't do that, God. I can't do what you're calling me to do. God knows that. God has planted clues all through the story that doesn't even mean that question should have been asked, but God is gracious and he still answers. And here's what he says in verse 12. He said, but I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. God reveals himself to two types of people, I believe. He reveals himself to people he is going to call, and he reveals himself to people he's going to comfort. And so the first half of this story is to Moses. And God reveals himself to Moses because he has a task for Moses, and he's going to call him. And when God calls Moses and when God calls us, two important things have to be known. The first thing is that God is with you. Look what he says to Moses. Before he ever says Moses is going to do it, he says the exact same thing about himself. I love the parallelism here. If you look in verse 7, the Lord says, I have seen the affliction of my people, I have heard, and I have come down to deliver them, and I will bring them up out of the land. Now, Moses, I have heard the cries of my people, and you will go and deliver them. Look at that. God has already told Moses, yeah, you're going to do it, but really I'm going to do it. I will be with you. I will be doing the work. You're right, Moses. You're right, RJ. You can't do it, but I am with you. And that changes everything. I am with you. I think the holy ground is the symbol here. Moses is on a hill that he's probably been on many times. It's Horeb. It's not the mountain of God to him, it's Horeb. But it becomes the mountain of God when God shows up and is with it. God consecrates normal ground and makes it holy. And God consecrates normal man and makes him holy. And the idea of holy here is not this religious purity, but it's everything God needs for his purpose. It's consecrated. There's a spoon in the tabernacle that's called holy. Do you know why? It's not because it's more pure than the other spoon that you use in your house. It's because it's used for God's service. It's the one God uses, and therefore it's holy. And so here's what he's saying to Moses with the holy ground. Here's what he's saying to Moses with the way he starts his narrative, is that you can't do it, but I can, and I am with you. And as long as I am with you, you are consecrated. You are able to accomplish what I've called you to. I love the repetition and the symbol there. But he says one more thing in verse 12. He says, and here is a sign. Moses doesn't ask for a sign. God gives it. It's always good when God gives you a sign when you don't ask for it. It's not always good to ask for that sign, as we see in the Old Testament, when God's already told us. But sometimes God just wants to show, I want you to know, this is new. Y'all have to understand that God has never done this before. God has never, ever sent someone to other people as his messenger. All through the Old Testament, when God spoke to any of the patriarchs, he himself came. And so he understands that this is new, this is different, and he realizes that with Moses. And so he goes above and beyond to make sure Moses knows, I've thought of everything. Trust me. I know what they're going to say. I know what they're going to ask. I've already got some stuff for you to give them. Just trust me. And so he says, here's a sign for you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. There's a promise of victory. There's a promise of accomplishing the purpose. Isn't that great? When God calls me, the great fear is failure. What if I don't do what God needs me to do? And that's our feeling. What God needs me to do this thing. And so now I bear that weight and I bear that burden of making sure I get the job done, for all eternity relies on me. And of course, that's silly. But I go to that place sometimes, and I think we all do. That what if I fail? And so God says, here's what you're going to do. And I'm not going to tell you how long it's going to take, and I'm not going to tell you exactly all the details, but eventually you're going to end up right where you're supposed to be. And that's what he says to us as he calls us to follow him. I do not know where God is calling me specifically. I don't know what other churches one day he'll call me to. I don't know what other people. I don't know what other tasks. I don't know what other ministries. I don't even know what other people. Are there more kids? Are there kids that we're adopting? Or is there families that I need to go and be with and support? I don't have a clue specifically where God is calling me. But generally, I know where it is. One day, I'm going to stand before him. And because he's faithful, he's going to stand up. He's going to say, come on in. I'm going to the kingdom. And that's where I'm going to get. And I don't know if it's by way of Africa or by way of Abilene or Pecan Grove for the next 50 years, but I'm going to be in the kingdom one day. And there's some route that I'm going to take. And it's not going to be easy. The road is hard, which leads to life. But I'm going to be okay until I'm glorious. And that's the promise of the call. That if you stick with me, it may not be easy, but you're going to be okay until you're victorious, until you're glorious. And that's got to be enough for us. I think that's the picture of the burning bush. The amazing thing about the burning bush is not that just that it didn't burn up. I mean, that is, of course, the amazing thing, that it didn't burn up. But think about it this way. The very thing that should have burned it up, the fire, is actually the very thing that preserves it. You see, as long as God's presence stays in that bush, it will never go away. That bush could have literally been eternal if God had stayed there. When God leaves, it won't burn up near as fast as if it was set on fire, but it's gone. It's going to eventually die. And so the very thing that should have destroyed it preserves it. Listen, walking with God is not going to be easy. It might get hot. It might get uncomfortable. But the easy life eventually is going to lead to destruction. It's the hard life that will preserve you forever, and that's what Jesus says. Jesus says that if you stay with me, you will never die. You'll have eternal life. He actually uses this verse when the Pharisees and Sadducees are arguing about resurrection. He says, don't you know this verse about the bush? Don't you know the story about the bush, is how he puts it. And then he explains that once God is your God, he's always your God. So God is with the called. To the called, here's what he says, I am. That I will be with you is translated that way for our English understanding because it's more logical. But that word is I am in the present. He says, I am with you. It's the exact same word he's about to use when Moses asked him his name. So here's his response to when he calls you. He says, I am. He gives us his name. I am with you. But he also calls another group. But I want you to understand, God doesn't call us because he needs us. And this is really what I realized in that failure idea, is that God's already accomplished it. He doesn't need me to do it. And so why does he call me? He calls me because he wants me to experience him. He wants me to experience that blessing of knowing him and seeing him work. He wants Moses to be able to see what he's about to do with Pharaoh. And man, what if Moses had missed that? Yeah, Moses' life was hard listening to those grumbling Israelites and living in the wilderness, but what if he had missed seeing Yahweh at work and talking to Yahweh face to face on the mountain and later in the tabernacle? He wants to bless you. That's why he calls you. Cameron and I, when we go shopping with Dina, she sends us on missions, mostly because it's easier for us to get away. She can do 12 aisles while we do 2. But I take Cameron with me because we have a mission. Now, is there any chance when I take Cameron on a mission to go get Tostitos chips that we're going to fail? No, of course not. I'm going with him. We're going to do it. It's not about that. But it's an opportunity to be with him. And he has now a purpose that in his mind, I get to choose the kind of chips. And I get to be a part of this. And he has ownership. But there's no chance we're going to fail. That's what I feel like it is when God calls me. I think I've got the weight of the world on my shoulders, and he's like, we're just going to get some chips because I want to hang out with you, and I want to have some alone time with you. And so let's go, and we play up that mission because it's fun and because we can love on each other that way. That's what God's doing. He wants to bless you. The second person he shows up to is in this passage right here, and that's the one who's in need. The people who are in need. And that's the rest of us. God calls us, and he also comforts us. You see, the Israelites aren't in a place right now where they're being called to do anything great for God, except for survive. And some of us, there are seasons where that's all God is asking us to do, is just make it one more day. And for us, he comes to us and he says, listen, it's going to be okay. Look what Moses says in the story. Moses said to God, if I come to the people of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? And Moses gives 3 answers. God gives 3 answers to Moses' one question. He says this. God said to Moses, I am who I am. We know that phrase. We know that word. I am who I am. Say to them, say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, the Lord, which is Yahweh, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. So he says, I am, which is actually not Yahweh. I didn't even realize this until I was doing study for this. I just always knew that Yahweh was a form of I am, but the reason they say Yahweh versus I am is because I am is the present active version, which is Ayah. I know it sounds like a karate shot, but Ayah or Ayah is I am. Yahweh is He is. It's the third person form of I am, because we can't say I am because that would be us. So we say He is, but it means I am, which is God's name. So it doesn't really matter for, okay, is Yahweh really his name or is I am? Because he says, call me Yahweh for the rest of forever. Call me Yahweh. It's okay. But I do think it's significant for this passage. He says that present active communicates his presence. He's with Moses. He actually talked to Moses. Moses isn't just relaying what God sent to him by a mediator. God himself was here and he said, I am. And he says, go to the people, speak first person from me Moses is the first prophet, the first person who's ever done this. Speak in the first person and say, I am has sent me to you. Basically communicating to the people what he's about to communicate in the narrative. I am still going with you. I didn't just send Moses. I am here as well. I am here. I am with you. He says the same thing to comfort us as he does to call us. Do you know that? It just takes on a new nuance. Now, instead of, I am with you and I will overcome all the obstacles, Moses, now it's, I am with you in your pain, in your suffering, in your slavery, and in your toil. I have been with you, and I always am with you. Always in the present. I'm here. I know it's hard, but I am with you. I will be with you. No matter what happens, no matter what you go through, I won't always fix it at the time you want me to fix it. One day will be glorious, but in the moment, at least know I am with you. He says that here to the people. He says, I have observed you, verse 16. Go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, has appeared to me saying, I have observed you and what has been done to you in Egypt, and I promise that I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, and all the other ites. He says, I know what's going on. Notice that he doesn't tell them what he tells Moses. Later on, he tells Moses this. He says, they will listen to your voice. You and the elders of Israel shall go to the king of Egypt and say to him, the Lord, the God. Okay, so now we're no longer in the quotation. This is him telling Moses this, not saying Moses tell the elders this. Okay? I know it's kind of confusing, but that's important. He's now telling Moses this. Moses isn't supposed to tell the elders this. Here's what he's telling Moses. He says, this is actually what's going to happen. He says, y'all are going to go to the king of Egypt and say, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. And now please let us go a day's journey into the wilderness that we may sacrifice to the Lord. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless he's compelled by a mighty hand. So then I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all the wonders that I will do in it. And after that he will let you go. And not only will you go, but the Egyptians you will find favor in their sight, and they will not let you go empty-handed. They're going to give you some stuff that you can take with you. Okay? He knows it's not going to be 1, 2, 3 easy. First sign, sure, Pharaoh says, go on ahead. I'm not going to pursue you. There's not going to be a giant wall of water in front of you. You're not going to be in the wilderness without anything to eat or drink. He doesn't say any of that. And so listen, just because you're in struggles or you are in a place where it seems like things have gone wrong, doesn't mean God is not with you. God knows what's going to happen. Just because he didn't tell you, he did tell Moses, so that in this narrative we would know that God knows what's going to happen. And he also knows how it's going to turn out for their good. If you go read the rest of the narrative, you'll find that all of these problems were done with a purpose. God needed to teach the Israelites things, and he needed to show them things. He wanted to show them 10 signs so that they would have faith in him. So Pharaoh shouldn't have let them out after one. And so here's what I want you to know. When you're in the middle of your struggles, God is with you, and God is not surprised by them. And God is not unable to change them or to fix them. So if he doesn't, he's got a reason. That doesn't help you in your physical state. It doesn't help you in your suffering, but it is a comfort to know that, okay, I'm not out of his hand. He's with me, and he can help me. And if it gets to the point where I'm not okay, then he will help me. But until then, I'm going to trust that he is enough. God's concern and care can be comfort in uncertainty. He can also deliver us and take it away. But if nothing else, he promises, I am with you. And here's the other thing he promises, and they go hand in hand. But he promises, I am all you need. And sometimes he has to take everything else away for us to believe that and to see that. And that's hard. But this is what he tells the Israelites. I am all you need. This is my name forever. Look what he says. Say this to the people, Yahweh, which means He is. What's your problem? What do you need? He can do it. He can fix it. He is Yahweh. This is my name forever. It's not just for this people. It's not just for the next people. I want to make sure that you don't miss this. For all of my people forever, this is who I am. See, God's name isn't about a title, it's about a character. This is my character forever. I always am. What do you need? I am. Jesus shows us this when He does the 7 I am statements in John. If you remember those, He covers basically every need we could possibly have. And He says, I am. He says, I am the bread of life. No one ever, if you believe in me, you will not hunger. And the one who will never be thirsty again. Okay, so I am the one who will take care of your physical needs. You have physical needs? I am. I'm all you need. Okay? I am the light of the world. Anyone who walks in me will never walk in darkness. Okay? I know the direction. I will show you the way. I will help you know where you're going. What are your needs? Your needs are understanding. I've got it. I am the light of the world. He says, I am the door, talking about the sheep. I am the door, and the sheep come in and out of me and are saved through me, and they find pasture. I think the idea here is that your joy and satisfaction is found in Jesus. Not necessarily all of your pleasure, not necessarily everything fun you want to do in the world, but whatever leads to joy and satisfaction, I am. You cannot find joy and satisfaction in this world outside of Jesus. And He's saying, I am. I meet that need. I meet that need perfectly. What other needs do you have? Well, God, I have a need to be cared about, to be loved. He says, I am the good shepherd. I lay down my life for the sheep. I love you so much that I will die for you. You have that relationship with me. I love you more than anyone else can love you, and I can love you better than anyone else can love you. I am. You have an emotional need? I am. What other needs do you have, son? And I say, well, God, I want to know that I'm going to be safe. Well, I can't promise you things aren't going to be easy in this life, but I can promise you that I am the resurrection and the life. And that if you believe in me, though you die, you will always live. Okay? So I may not be safe, I may be thrown in prison, but nobody can take my life from me. I'm eternally safe and secure. What else, God? What are you? I need to know the God who created me. Well, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. You need the Father? I agree, you do need the Father. And you can't get there on your own, as RJ said, but I am the way, the truth, and the life. Well, there's only one more thing that I need, God. I need to know that I'm going to do something in this world. I want to accomplish something. And He says, I am the vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. And if you remain in me, you can bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. You want to bear fruit in this world? You want to do good in this world? You want to accomplish something that lasts? I am. So listen. He's not necessarily the path to your promotion or to the house at the corner or to wherever you want to go to college or to whatever else you might think you need in this life, but He is everything you need. And that's what He says. And is this true for the Egyptians? I am everything you need. I will take you where you need to go. But God's destination is where He will bring us. God's destination is where He will bring you. You see, He tells the Israelites, I'm going to bring you to the land flowing with milk and honey. Part of Him meeting our needs is admitting or accepting the fact that He gets to choose what I need and where I go. And His destination for me is glory. His destination for me is heaven. He gets to bring me there however He wants. and He will meet every single need I have along the way. But I don't get to demand, I want to get there by way of the bigger house or the easier life or the better salary or the life that has no medical problems or medical issues. It may be through cancer that I get to my destination, and so I say, okay, God, however you have to go, even if we have to walk dead through that Red Sea with the Egyptians behind me, you can take me to my destination. Part of this is accepting. God, you are all I need, but you also get to determine what I need. I don't. God doesn't reveal His name for His benefit. God knows I am. God knows His name. He knows who He is. So why does He reveal it to us? Well, it's obviously not for His benefit. He doesn't get any more glory by me knowing His name. But He does it because it benefits me. I now have peace. I now have freedom to know that I don't bear the weight of the world. I have freedom to know I'm not alone. I have peace to know I'm not alone and comfort in this world. And so listen, you can't get that just because His name is I am. You only get that when you believe His name is I am. And so here's the key, and we get to this in this last part, is what is your response? His name is still I am, whether you believe it or not, but it is no good for you unless you believe it. Does that make sense? Without faith, it doesn't help you at all. Because if I know that I'm safe because somebody tells me I'm safe, but I don't trust them at all, then I don't feel safe. Whether they're right or wrong makes no difference. Only what matters is what I believe. And so God is saying, this is who I am, but for it to benefit you at all, you've got to believe it. So Moses, do you believe me? And then Moses answered, but behold, chapter 4, but behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice, for they will say, the Lord did not appear to you. What did God say in verse 18 of chapter 3? And they will listen to your voice. And Moses answered, but behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice. Again, God has already answered his worries and objections, but God is gracious. When we don't believe God is enough, and this is Moses' first issue, he's saying, I don't think he really believes it. I'll get to that in a minute. But he's saying, God, I don't know if you're enough. I don't know if you're really able. I don't know if you really are who you say you are. And he says, well, I want to make sure you know that that's true. So here's what I'm going to do. And he gives him 3 signs. And I love the way God does this. He says, here's one. And he tells Moses to throw down the snake. And Moses runs from the snake. And he says, pick up the snake, Moses. And Moses picks it up and he has a staff. And he says, this is a great sign. And if they won't believe this, before Moses even tells him if it's enough or not, he says, and if they won't believe this, put your hand into your coat and then pull it out. And it has leprosy. And he says, now put it back in. And he puts it back in. And he pulls it out again and it's clean. He says, I am God over inanimate objects. I can do whatever I want in the created world. I am God over disease and healing. And he says, and if they don't believe that, go and show them their God is the Nile. Go dip out of the Nile and it will become blood, and pour it out and show them that I am also God over their gods, over life and death and over all the gods of the Nile. And before Moses ever gets a chance to respond to any of these, he keeps saying, and if that doesn't work, and if that doesn't work, which God's already told him, it's going to work. I've already told you it's going to work. But listen, God is merciful when we need more. I really believe that. When we need more to believe, he gives us more. He gets us to a point where it's not about, I don't have enough, it's just about response. And we see that that was the case with Moses. I believe it was already the case. I believe Moses was like me. I know God is enough. I just know. I've seen enough to know that he is all I need. Here's what I still struggle to believe, that he is good. I still struggle to believe that he's good. I say, I know God. I know you can, God, but I don't want you to. I don't want you to. I don't want deliverance. I just want forgiveness because I want to do it because I believe it'll bring me joy, this sin that I've got in my head, and then I want you to forgive me for it. I don't want you to deliver me from it because I believe it's good, and you say it's not. That is my story over and over and over. I know God is enough. There are times where I don't pray for God's deliverance from something because I know I'll get it, and I don't want it. I just want forgiveness later. Because I don't really believe that following Him radically is good or is best for me. I believe I'm going to miss out on so much if I give my whole life to Jesus. And many of you probably, if you're honest, say, yeah, that's where I'm at too. I'm scared to give it all to me because and I can list all these things that I'd miss out on. Chase and Jesse talked about this. And it was hard going on mission as God called us because we thought about all the good things we were going to miss. And they are good things that they listed. When I'm talking about my sin, it's really not anything good. But in that case, there were good things. They're going to miss relatives having babies and being born and seeing them grow up and all these good things. And Moses says, "Oh, my Lord, I'm not eloquent, either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant." What he's basically saying is, even since you've done all these miracles, you hadn't addressed the one that I'm worried about, which is I'm not a good talker. He's like, did you not see everything? You won't have to say a word. You start picking up snakes and pulling out leprosy. He says, and basically I believe what Moses is doing now is just making up excuses. He's saying, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. So what does God say? Again, just in case this really is about not believing God is enough, he says, I will be with your mouth. I love how he says that. I'm with you, now I'm with your mouth. What else you got, Moses? And so finally Moses says, all right, I realize this isn't getting where I want it to go. God, please don't make me do it. Finally he says, God, I just don't want to. I just don't really believe this is good for me. I'm going to miss out on some things. There's going to be some scary moments in my life. And so what does God do? God removes a blessing from him. He says, okay, you don't have to. I'll send Aaron with you. Now, notice that God doesn't remove his presence from Moses, and he doesn't remove his call. This is not rejection. Pharaoh rejects. Moses just has a weakness, has a weak moment in the way that we all do. And every time I say yes to sin and no to God and don't believe God is good, I've not rejected him and his salvation, but I have missed a blessing. What blessing did Moses miss? Some would say God was robbed of the opportunity to show that I can even overcome Moses' stuttering problem and get glory. But I say, look at the rest of the story. Do you really believe there's a little bit more out there that people are doubting? Well, God parted the sea and he did these 10 things in front of Pharaoh, but he still couldn't overcome that Moses' mouth. Nobody's saying that. God didn't miss out on any glory. Who missed out? Moses. Because he didn't get to see God overcome this in him and get to see God as that much more real. Every time God does something in our life, we get to see that he's real and not just this idea that is told to me about on Sundays. And that is the greatest blessing we can have, is to see that God is real. And Moses loses that blessing. Moses learns his lesson. In chapter 33, he realizes that when I don't trust God, it cost me. And Moses is right. There's some good things you're going to miss. But let's think about this. We always think about the things we're going to miss out on if I follow God. But what about the things I'm going to miss out on if I don't? It's harder to think about because we'll never know. You and I, maybe until we get to heaven, maybe there will be a movie running, but I don't think so. I don't think God's going to remind us of all our failings. But we'll probably never know of the blessings we missed out on because we said no. I don't know. I wish I could list all my testimonies of what would have happened. I don't know. But I have enough knowledge of God and his goodness to know that, yeah, I kept some good things by saying no, but I lost a lot of good ones as well. And so, yes, you will lose some good things if you say no to God, but you will lose some better things if you don't. I don't know if I said that right, but I think you understand. God is good. So Moses learns his lesson. Exodus 33, God says, God's fed up with the Israelites at this point. And he says, you go up to the promised land. I told you you could. You go to the land, but I'm not going with you. I'm not going. My presence isn't going. If I go with you, I'll probably kill you. His literal words. So when mom and dad, when you say that to your kids, you're just speaking scripture at this point. If I go with you, I will kill you. But you can take them. I'm still going to keep my promises. And what does Moses say? Moses says, no, God. Don't send us to the good place if your presence isn't there. Because, yeah, there's some good stuff there, but the best stuff is in your presence. He says, we're not going. Don't send us if you won't go with us. And God relents and says, okay. He changes his mind. He says, because you prayed, I'll go with you, Moses. Because you realize that I am good. And I am better than the best that this world has to offer. A land flowing with milk and honey. But without God, it's just a land that might have been. That's what he says. Do we trust God? Moses learns his lesson. Have we? There was a man that I met in that park, and he left that park with nachos and a snow cone and probably a couple hot dogs that I didn't see. He left with a full belly, and his needs in that day that he knew about met. But he left an incredible blessing in that park because there's an opportunity cost to saying no to God. God is calling you to something. God is reminding you of his comfort for you. I don't know where you're at in this life, in this moment. But I know that if you listen to God today and if you met God, he wants you to know that he is with you, that you will be victorious if you follow him, and that everything he calls you to is good. And it may cost you some good, but it'll provide better. But the only way for that to be effective in your life is to believe that he really is. I don't think it's even to be obedient. That follows. If you really believe God is all the things that he says he is, you're going to be obedient. But do you really believe? Are you willing to stake your life on it and say, you know what, I'm going to follow him wherever he leads me. And everything else that I have dreamed for myself, I'm going to leave it behind. And he can bring it back if he wants to, but if he doesn't, that's fine because he's got something better. Do you believe that strongly? That's the response he's calling you to today. What will it be? Let's pray.